Alright everyone, the US has formally withdrawn from the INF treaty, that is the Intermediate Range Ballistic Missile Treaty that we had for a long time with Russia. I think that was pioneered in the Reagan era, if I remember correctly. Some people are trying to dogpile Trump right now and say, well, he's trying to cause a nuclear war. It's funny, how can he be a Russian puppet and yet posture on basically a deep Cold War posturing with the Russians? Obama sat by and did nothing, really, when the Russians openly and flagrantly violated this treaty multiple times by developing new intermediate range missiles and testing them in Kazakhstan. It happened on like 3 different occasions. Obama never withdrew us in the treaty. He said, shame on Russia, little bit of new sanctions for you, shame, shame, condemnation, strongly worded letter, very, very concerned. We'll put a couple more tanks in Poland to make sure you don't blitzkrieg him or something. That's all he did. It was like his red lines with every other country. China better not manipulate its currency like this. Oh, they did? Shame on you. You're not playing nicely like a normal nation. Kim Jong-un tested another atomic weapon. That crosses a red line. You better stop it. Oh, they tested another? Well, so be it. In Syria, he did the same thing. The one time that he wanted to belly up to the bar, Congress shot him down because he was suggesting attacking the same forces responsible for fighting his friends in ISIS. Which is really what they were. I mean, FSA was just basically a middleman designed to take U.S. arms shipments and give it to the real terrorists in the region. Yeah, basically just the tradesmen. Yeah, that's really what happened there. Sort of like when the weapons that we gave to the Sinaloa cartel ended up outside of Sinaloa control and then killed some border agents. Fast and Furious, something the media still never talks about. Gun control for thee, but not for me, says Obama as he gives automatic weapons to literal criminals in Central America. What a wonderful time. Or in Mexico, rather. No, the Cold War is pretty much back on. It's not Trump's fault. The Democrats all this time have stymied any real diplomatic progress with Russia by treating it like an automatic pariah state based on their lie that somehow they interfered in the U.S. election. They're still making the claim now. But it's funny, when Donald Trump was saying, well, I think the election might not be fully fair, all of the Democrats chortled and told the public, he's full of it. Nobody can hack the election. Nobody can rig a voting machine. Nobody can do voter fraud. No foreign state can possibly interfere. It's illegal, so it can never happen. They said this for several years. And meanwhile, then Obama came and said, well, yeah, at the time I knew this was going on, but I didn't want to say anything. It influenced the election to feed into Trump's xenophobic statements and stuff. Bullshit. It never happened. There was no Russian election interference. But now, we've got a real Cold War on our hands. You got to realize the clock's closer to midnight now than it should be. You'd think over time there'd be progress. It's like it's almost the 2020s. It's not like the 50s anymore with all of the propaganda and stuff back then. Maybe we should go back to that. Maybe we should deploy propaganda against commies again. Maybe we should start telling the population, yeah, by the way, it's okay to prep a little bit. If only for topical disasters. Yeah, it's okay to own a Geiger counter. If you have a firearm, it's a good thing. You probably should have combat armor. Yes, you should be prepared for the possibility that we get wiped out in a nuclear attack at some point because our government is stupid. Obviously doesn't know what it's doing, is totally dysfunctional. Trump's not even the greatest in the world. At least he's trying. In diplomacy, he's made several major gains. Not just on trade deals, but in Korea. There's a possibility of real lasting peace in a pariah state, the Hermit Kingdom, that nobody ever expected would ever, accept peace. Nobody ever expected that within the U.S. politics. Like, well, eventually, we're going to have to go to war or something. I think Trump foresaw that too, and he's like, well, we'll make one last ditch effort, otherwise we're going to have to press the little red button, won't we? Because they're going to do something crazy at some point. Once China's off board with them, they're going to go have a conniption fit if they don't have peace. They're going to have to repair ties with the ROK. And thankfully that's happening. Now, this is worrisome. It's no joke. These missiles will destroy the world, essentially, in a nuclear exchange. By the way, some people say, well, I'm in a nation that doesn't have nukes, no major military presence. Do you not think, in a million years, both Russia and the U.S. don't have contingencies for at least taking your capital and large cities off the map? Of course they would. They don't want you to be the next superpower and give them repercussions for having entered into a nuclear war and become They want to emerge victorious from their bunkers 100 years later. They want the straggling, irradiated remains to be theirs, and then they want to be able to go and gobble up other things. The U.S. has the same bottom line. The only difference being, at least publicly stated, our policy is not to strike first. but to strike second and then strike the hardest, basically do the most damage that we can. It's not clear anymore that we can do that, though, because the fucking Democrats, the same fucking Democrats that want to antagonize the Russians, won't let him modernize our nuclear stockpile or secure the border against the possibility of terrorists. Someone with a briefcase nuke, yes, they probably did actually get developed. We don't even know that they're not still there. They could be, literally, somebody could walk across the border right now, walk to San Antonio, and blow up the downtown. And it would primarily be the fault of the Democrats, because that would probably be the point of entry. Oh yeah, I'm just walking across the border. They had a little docu-series there, a couple of the alt-media people there, where they went to the border, some of the more porous parts. What's the border consist of? It's a few rows of barbed wire and some steel barriers to prevent vehicles from crossing. That doesn't mean you can't walk across with a briefcase. There's no electronic monitoring. Remote location, all you gotta do is duck and cover behind a hill or some trees when the ice shows up and evade them for a couple of miles, you're home free. Wonderful. Doesn't it feel great? Don't you feel secure? Our nuclear stockpile is decades old. The Russians are advancing theirs. We still need to redevelop our main battle tank at some point, even though the Abrams is really great. I think they semi-modernized it. We need to do more about the railgun, since the Chinese supposedly have created one that fully functions and we're a step behind them. We sort of switched our mind halfway and said, oh, lasers are cooler though, we'll develop those instead. Why don't you do both? Yeah, it would be nice to have a better deterrent now, wouldn't it? I want a strong military. I think that there are ways to streamline and make it cheaper. I think that there are a lot of things that our military does that doesn't, like no big contracts. Like, I remember at the time, the mother of all bombs, you know, which Obama loved dropping one of them. It gave him a total stiffy. I think it was in Afghanistan. Mother of all bombs can level several city blocks completely. Massive explosion comparable to a small nuke, really. basically, the economic alternative to a bunker buster, to like a Davy Crockett device or something like that. It costs like $500,000 to make one. It's just a big-ass bomb with a lot of conventional explosives packed in. Instead, we've frittered away our money on much smaller explosives that are like 10 times as expensive. It's like $5 million to fire a missile that'll do far less damage when we already have full air superiority anywhere we want to establish it. Why the fuck aren't we building more mother of all bombs? We should terrify our enemies by having bigger and badder and many more weapons. We should modernize the stockpile and probably begin making more nukes. Look, if this treaty... Look, the Russians, I would not be surprised if at some point in the future they look at the U.S. posturing and say there's no other choice, and they start testing nukes again. Not above ground, probably. They'd probably do what North Korea does. Other states may do the same. China might. China will probably redevelop its stockpile. They're developing the next generation of missiles. They make some obviously false statements about their capabilities, but they are better than what they had. Meanwhile, we sit here on our ass and do nothing. We've done virtually no testing of any of these systems until very recently, basically, the Trump administration. We took a 10-year hiatus almost on actually bothering to advance our military. We just kept funding it as was. Our highest readiness in this country was in the 1990s. So, I think we got a little problem. And then the Democrats want to antagonize people. So, I mean... It's regrettable that we have to withdraw from this, although it is Russia's fault solely for this one. But I mean, come on. At the very least, if you're going to have a war footing, act like it fully. Don't half-ass it and say we're going to say mean things about Russia, scrap a bunch of treaties, but not modernize our nukes. That's suicidal. That's fucking crazy. That's about all. Peace out.